Today we're going to be looking at the second iteration of the SilverCross Jet that came out last year, promising 62 updates to the original model. We're a bit late with this review, of course, but in our defense, the updated version only just appeared in stores here, which I have a hunch might be the result of poor sales with the original. And information online also suggests that there won't be a new version for 2021. In any case, we're going to have a thorough look at the model today, and thus fulfill something of a direct promise made to SilverCross themselves, since they're the only company so far to have a rep actually call us in reaction to the criticisms from one of our videos. As a result, a certain degree of attention in this video will then be devoted to examining what has changed in comparison with our original take on the Jet, but we'll be sure to evaluate the model in terms of where it stands on the current market as well, which is also quite different than what it was at the time of the Jet's initial launch. So let's have a look then, beginning with some stats. The new Jet clocks in right around 6 kilos and folds down to 55 by 30 by 18 centimeters, which is within the hand luggage requirements of the IATA, the International Air Traffic Association. As far as weight capacity is concerned, the model is claimed to take an increased weight versus the 2019 model of 25 kilos in the seat, though, due to structural concerns, which I'll cover in a bit, I'd advise anyone purchasing this model to not load it up with anywhere close to that much weight. As far as the seat is concerned, the 2020 version has increased the size a bit, and with roughly 35 centimeters of width, a longer base and backboard, a good length from the backboard to the canopy, and an adjustable leg rest, the Jet has potentially the largest seat size among ultra-compacts on the current market, at least with respect to these elements. Unfortunately though, they seem to have forgotten that a child's legs grow in proportion to the rest of their body, and have neglected to put a footrest on the model, thus really angling actual use very much towards the period before a child's legs become too long for the leg rest, which I would place at around 2 years old. With the bigger seat, it will of course still work for children older than this, but preferably for shorter trips out, where your child won't be sitting in the stroller long enough for that footrest to become a real discomfort. Please note that the front crossbar does not work as a footrest, both because it sits too far beneath the baseboard, and also because it's a key hinge element of the model's fold, and should not be subjected to potential extra wear. With regards to other aspects of the seat, the Jet has a near full recline, but the upright position is not as fully upright as I'd have liked. And while the textiles are of decent quality, being similar to the somewhat smooth and sleek sort they've used for many years now, as with the original Jet, they're still screwed to the chassis, which makes them incredibly difficult to remove for a wash. As far as the canopy is concerned, the model offers a good balance between sitting high off the seat back, yet also extending quite low, so as to provide adequate sun coverage. Moving on to look at parent comfort and ease of use, the new Jet's handle has been heightened by a few centimeters, standing now at just around an even meter off the floor, which is not as high as some ultra-compacts, but which certainly puts it into a good comfort range for most people. The shopping basket on this model is quite small and difficult to access in my opinion, both because it's largely blocked off from the backside by the Jet's umbrella-style folding apparatus, as well as from the front by the adjustable leg rest, and also because its already limited volume is partially consumed by a crossbar, right smack in the middle. As far as folding is concerned, the process hasn't changed since the initial version, and despite requiring that you work with both hand and foot, is quite easy on the down fold. When folding it up for use, however, the process is a bit more complicated, and involves checking multiple points to be sure that everything is locked in place. In addition, as I will explain in the next section, this model is quite prone to looseness and symmetry issues after it's sustained a little wear, and folding the model upright often gets a lot more fiddly as a result. When folded, the Jet's bumper bar extends upwards, creating something like a wheeled suitcase out of the folded package, albeit with a relatively low handle. And the shape of the bumper bar when folded can also be used as a sling, for carrying the model over your shoulder. Note though that it's important to be a bit careful to keep the bumper bar from breaking. As far as driving is concerned, like most ultra-compacts, the Jet is primarily built for smoother terrain, and despite its slightly above average size rear wheels, will struggle when the road gets rougher, feeling rickety and jittery as a result of the model's horizontal folding elements. With the shift to the 2020 model, SilverCross has widened the wheels a little and improved the model's suspension, but in my opinion, the light nature of the model as well as its multi-hinge structure unfortunately prevent these updates from really having much effect towards improving terrain capability. Okay, let's move on to the mechanics then, looking at the new Jet from top to bottom, starting off with the folding system and the general structure. And as an ultra-compact, these two are much more deeply linked than they are on larger strollers, since folding down to within cabin luggage guidelines necessarily dictates how the whole stroller is put together. In general then, the way the Jet folds is a sort of a hybrid between classic umbrella designs, as can be seen in particular with the cross-hatched horizontal folding setup on the lower rear frame, and a more modern design, as can be seen on the upper portion of the model, where a double button activation mechanism releases a horizontal hinge in the center of the handle, whose fold, in turn, retracts a pair of plastic pins halfway down the handle arms via internal wires, thus unlocking the key locking mechanisms. In our first review of the Jet, we predicted that these locking points would be the major breaking point on this model, due to their somewhat fragile plastic construction, despite the fact that this point is responsible for taking the brunt of pressure during use. And from feedback, as well as a couple of pages of customer reviews on Amazon, this definitely seems to have proven true. The unfortunate part about this, then, is that despite some reinforcing of the chassis, this mechanism appears largely unchanged. Certainly not changed to the extent that it would need to be for this to cease being the key weak point of the model, which should have involved, in my opinion, using metal instead of plastic and extending the peg further within its locking channel. For me, this is a major oversight, especially since they've clearly had the chance to fix this design between launches. The last thing I'd like to elaborate on with regards to the jet structure has to do with the compounding effect of the model's horizontal fold, which necessitates a wide number of extra hinges, thus creating a lot more areas that can loosen up on the model than would otherwise existed. In particular, since they've taken a bit of a cheap approach to riveting. Over time then, in addition to already feeling a bit rickety right out of the box, subsequent looseness from wear is likely to exacerbate the model's other problems, in addition to making driving less comfortable, and that this looseness has a strong potential to create symmetry issues with the hinges and locking points on either side of the chassis, which can both complicate folding and also puts even more pressure on the arm-located locking mechanisms, increasing their chance of breaking. Moving down to the back end then, there are a few updates to make note of. First being that the thickness of all the wheels has been increased. There are now ball bearings in all the wheels, which was something we found particularly disappointing with the original model, and the rear wheels are also now screwed to the chassis rather than riveted, which allows for at least some degree of disassembly. While all of these things are definitely improvements, it's important to note that the lighter, smaller, and looser nature of the Jet's overall design will prevent several of these updates from having much effect towards really improving stability and terrain capability. The last element to look at on the rear frame is the brake system, which, like the first iteration, is wire-based and still doesn't have an adjustment screw. It's a pretty simple setup as far as wire-based systems go, but without the adjustment screw, and since the system is quite difficult to disassemble, regular lubrication inside the brake wire is an absolute necessity to prevent problems down the road. Okay, let's finish up by looking at the front end. And other than that little increase in wheel thickness and improved suspension, I'm not really noticing much difference at all between the 2020 version and what came before. The size of the front wheels is fine for a model of this sort, and the swivel locks are also decent. But what is not okay, however, is a lack of any sort of wobble protection in the connection between the fork axles and the front wheel housings. The front wheels sit a bit loosely here, right out of the box, and what often happens over time, with virtually all four-wheel swivel wheel models, is that the axles tend to wear down the insides of the housings, increasing that looseness, and eventually, when they're loose enough, leading to a problem where the front wheels wobble when driving. A lot of manufacturers these days use a variety of techniques for mitigating this sort of wear, from spring-loaded pads or O-rings to including multiple circumferences in the connection itself in order to disperse the pressure. But unfortunately, none of these solutions seem to be present on the 2020 Jet, just as they weren't on the previous version, and thus I would still call this problem a definite possibility with this model. So, would I recommend buying the new SilverCross Jet then? Despite having made a variety of positive changes with the model, my general feeling is that the Jet is still significantly overpriced in relation to the wider market. The model is simply too fragile to function as more than an occasional use holiday stroller to a relatively smooth destination, and preferably for a child between 6 months and 2 years of age. In my opinion, the high price is most likely based on style and branding, but without sufficient longevity and performance, this can only go so far. In any case, we hope you found this video interesting, and if you did, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future. In addition, if you are currently shopping for a stroller, we have a buyer's guide on our Patreon page which lists a wide range of models that we recommend, with a lot of technical and lifestyle related information. You can find it by following the link in the description. Thank you.